So, the Avant Gardener is an aggregation of 10 narrative music videos that interlock into one feature film that you can watch as one story all the way through. Each film was sort of written and designed in a different style of filmmaking. So, we have one that's animated, stop motion over live action, black and white, split screen, and each one sort of depicts a different chapter of a person's life, in this case, an artist, to sort of see the reasons and functions of how and why we make decisions, what role creative expression plays in our lives and why, how do we step into our power as people and artists and innovators, and how do we find our voice in a sort of chaotic world where we have a lot of different priorities going over a lot of different sets of values, and how do we decide for ourselves which values we'd like to prioritize in our own lives and why. This film was incredibly meaningful to me. It provided a catalyst between me and an artistic community that I've enjoyed playing and dreaming and working in these past 10 years. And, I sort of got to raise my hand and say, hey, I have this concept, I have this idea for this thing. Like, who wants to play, who wants to contribute their work to this greater work and see if we can make something that is of interest and value and use to people. And then I got to sort of apply all of my own interests and intentions and skills and get to flex a lot of muscles that I haven't in quite some time, and also face a lot of things that I hadn't previously faced. I got to direct for the first time. I really got to learn about filmmaking and producing while I was doing it, and sort of build the boat while sailing it. And that opportunity, I find, is such a rich environment to learn about yourself, to connect with your fears and your hopes and your anxieties, and to see how one thing that unravels in a moment that you are so sure is a critical mistake becomes this other thing that is so beautiful and so profoundly meaningful to you that you almost felt silly for spending all that negative energy worrying about the outcome. And to me, this film represents such an incredibly authentic version of that, of having an interest and an excitement and stepping into that moment and just sort of showing up for whatever happens next. And that was both my experience in making it. I think it really leaked into all the different aspects of this particular piece. And it makes me feel such pride and joy to show up now and say, hey, here's what we did. I can't wait to see, what it says to you and what it means to you, and, what it will lead to in terms of how we put ideas together going forward. And it feels like such an incredible thing to share with my artistic community. And I'm just overwhelmed with gratitude. I had this idea while working on a different campaign, I think for an advertisement pitch, and I was playing with this idea of format and why music has the role that it has traditionally played with film as sort of this garnish to a main course. And I was thinking, I spent so much of my work as a musician participating in soundtracks to movies or soundtracks to TV shows. And I thought about, what might happen if we had a film track to a record instead of a soundtrack to a movie, and what that might look like. And I had inspiration from some of the giants that I grew up with, like Pink Floyd or the Beatles or Jim Henson or Monty Python even, in terms of how, these particular musicians or artists, they took different aspects of different formats and played with them to communicate their message. And it's something that was really exciting to me as a kid, and was one of the things that got me excited about working as an artist in in the beginning. And it was something I was excited to explore further and see what could be done there in that world. Sometimes I wonder how it doesn't show who I am as an artist. Sometimes I think the Avant Gardener is who I am as an artist, because I feel like I really found my feet in this project in terms of getting to find a balance between things I had never tried before, things I had been doing since childhood, concepts that I've been wanting to play with for years, and now finally had kind of a excuse or opportunity to apply those interests. Everything from the costume design to the prop building to storyboarding the film, to getting to produce and direct for the first time and learn about filmmaking and learn about how to bring an artist community together to achieve something like this, because it's not the kind of project you can do on your own. And so, learning to lean in to trust in your fellow artists, and also to try and create an atmosphere where everyone can do their best work. And I feel like I was able to do my best work by showing up and being open and sort of aiming for a wholehearted experience of making a thing that was important to me, that I felt I wanted to make. And so that was really a big transition and a big journey for me. And I think it's hard to separate sort of that work from the piece itself, personal work. I think my biggest hope for this work is that it challenges other artists to examine their own relationships with their own work, to examine the reasoning and motivation and inspiration and passion behind what drives the choices that they make and the work that they do, and to really look at the things, maybe the places they haven't given themselves permission to explore and why, and to have this overwhelming and overriding feeling of connectedness, because we're not alone in this. And anytime we have the bravery to step out into the world and show that world a small authentic piece of ourselves, that risk is always worth it. And it is difficult and it is challenging and it is risky and it is hard sometimes. And it is also elating and powerful and beautiful, and is the thing that drives the work that I do, and I think drives many of the artists that I know. And if this film could do anything for that community, it would be to act as a reminder that, wanting to do a project, having an interest in a different field or a different medium, is a good enough reason and qualifies you as a participant to step up and show up and try to do something that is interesting to you. And that you can always raise your hand and say, hey, like, I want to participate. What can I do? To say, hey, I have this idea. Who wants to play with me? I will definitely say the most notable part of my growing up experience and the influence that experience has had on my creative work as an adult speaks more to the style of my parents and family unit than it necessarily did to the culture that I was brought up in or the communities that I was raised in. And I think that's because my parents really focused a lot of energy and intentionality on creating atmospheres for me and my siblings as children to really feel safe, to feel free, to have relief from the stress and anxiety and musings of adulthood, and to really live in this imagination rich and interest encouraged and artistic, expressive space where we could, go get our hands dirty and, you know, go outside and build things and, work on cars. Or, I expressed an interest in painting from a young age and painted a lot with my grandmother. And then that became a featured part of my identity in that stage of my life, which was this, artist character that I think I've been growing into, since then, trying to figure out what that means to me. The foundation of art and healing is really a foundation that looks at the relationship between art and creative expression and the healing world and wellness, and how those two communities can benefit by engaging together. Part of my role with that foundation has been as a marketing consultant, a volunteer. I produced and designed a film festival, the Creatively Connected Film Festival that launched this past year, whose focus was to look at loneliness as a sort of health epidemic and to sort of elevate the work of filmmakers who were exploring loneliness and its impact on us as a society and a community, and just rally a conversation around that and how we can use creative expression as a possible tool in sort of waging war against loneliness and isolation.